Hey, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. The last few days, I've been editing a story by Chuck Joyce, who is a senior editor for the magazine about Gettysburg. The 160th anniversary will soon be upon us, and Chuck has done a marvelous job telling the story of the cemetery and putting portraits of some of the soldiers to the actual grave sites. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this story in the magazine. As part of the editing that I've been doing, I've been fact checking all of the information that Chuck has written, and I learned something new. The newness was the recollections of a nurse with whom I was not familiar. She writes a wonderful, wonderful recollection. Her name is Emily Bliss Thacher Souder, and she is born in 1814. So she is in her, let me see, she's about 50 years old when the Battle of Gettysburg happens. She's living in Philadelphia, and she hears the news and jumps into action. By July 15th, she's on a train making her way to what is essentially a mass casualty event and a humanitarian crisis that's unfolding with thousands and thousands of wounded soldiers, dead soldiers being buried, dead horses on the battlefield. The little town of Gettysburg is completely overwhelmed. The Confederate Army is still on the retreat. No one exactly knows where they are. And so it is a frightening time. And there's a lot at stake trying to care for all of these wounded soldiers. So Emily is on the scene. And a year later, less than a year later, in April of 1864, her collected letters become this book. And the book is titled Leaves from the Battle-field of Gettysburg. I want to read you what she calls the introductory letter, which is basically the introduction or the preface, and she sets up everything. She does such a wonderful job. It's such a vivid account of what folks learned about the battle as it was unfolding and how they reacted to it. In this passage I'm going to read to you, you'll hear two names mentioned. The first one is Major John F. Reynolds, who is killed in action on the first day of the battle. The other name is Thomas Brainerd, who is a doctor of divinity. He's the pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. So let me give you a little bit of this passage so you can get a feel for it. Here we go. Quote, "The dark days at the end of June and the beginning of July 1863 are too recent to be forgotten by any Pennsylvanian. All hearts were heavy with anxiety as each hour brought reports of fresh outrages committed by the rebel invaders. From morning till midnight, the drum was heard in our streets, which were filled with soldiers drilling and recruiting, and 200 clergymen walked in procession to the mayor to offer their services wherever most needed. We all felt that the hand of the Lord was upon us in judgment, and to him alone could we look for succor, since vain was the help of man. The 4th of July was a day of great solemnity. Religious services were held in nearly all of our churches, and in the words of the honored rector of Christ Church, it was felt that the same day that witnessed the birth of the nation might also approve either the day of its salvation or of its destruction. Tidings were received that day previous of a battle in progress at Gettysburg, that General Reynolds was killed and his corps driven from its position. The anxiety was intense. On Sunday, rumors came of success to our arms and defeat to the rebels, and as rumor deepened into certainty and the pall lifted from the hearts of the people, The first impulse was to prepare and forward with all possible rapidity supplies of every kind. In several churches, the regular services were omitted and sewing machines were put in requisition in making up shirts and drawers, while from almost every house, jellies, stimulants, and old linen were sent to some point to be packed immediately for the battlefield. Many clergymen and citizens, as well as surgeons and physicians of every grade, hastened to the relief of the wounded and dying, and many ladies made speedy arrangements to go to the field. On Tuesday came the glorious news of the surrender of Vicksburg, and it was felt that there should be a public demonstration of feeling, a public thanksgiving to the God of battles who had confounded our enemies in the midst of us. The Reverend Dr. Brainerd, whose warm-hearted loyalty has made his name a tower of strength, was invited to officiate, and the Union League, preceded by a fine band playing the national airs, marched in procession to Independence Hall, where a prayer of thanksgiving for victory, for Gettysburg and for Vicksburg, was offered to the Almighty Deliverer in the presence of assembled thousands, who stood reverently uncovered near the consecrated spot. At its close, the solemn notes of Old Hundred were heard from the State House steeple, whither the band had gone, and the vast multitude sang in grand chorus the words, "Praise God, whom all blessings flow." It was an occasion to be remembered forever. As the days passed on, we received continued accounts of the suffering and distress among our noble soldiers, and with 3 other ladies, the writer decided to visit Gettysburg to aid in the great work. The following letters were written in much haste, either in the early morning or late at night, to relieve anxiety and gratify the eager interest of friends at a distance. They have been recently gathered for publication in the earnest hope that while giving a truthful picture of a portion of the field of labor, they may also aid in providing needful supplies for our brave soldiers in the hospitals and on the field. For the Sanitary Commission, which since the beginning of this dire rebellion has been doing the work of the Good Samaritan, pouring in the oil and the wine. To this good and great cause, these letters are offered by a loyal woman. Philadelphia, April 21st, 1864. Wow. What a letter, what an opening to this tremendous book filled with vivid accounts. Look it up. You can find it. In fact, I'll put it in the comments below so you can read it yourself. What an interesting book. What a sense of being there. Imagine you're in Philadelphia. Lee's army has been moving into Pennsylvania for the better part of a month. Philadelphia is turned into a military training place with all the local folks gathered up to defend the city. Nearby Harrisburg is in the same condition. Meanwhile, the great armies are fighting in Gettysburg. And as news is trickling in, everyone is gathering tense, full of anxiety, waiting for the results. I love the moment when she makes the comparison of July 4th as the birth of the country or the possible death of the country. So hope you enjoyed this passage. We'll be back with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Until then, take care.